think you've heard the news that Sergio Perez has re-signed until 2026. Well, that's goodbye to any chances of us seeing Carlos Sainz going to Red Bull, to be honest, frankly, ever again, until of course Max Verstappen ever decides to leave the team. That's absolutely 1,000% no chance of us ever seeing Esteban Ocon drive for Red Bull, since of course, let's be honest, I don't really think Esteban Ocon is a Red Bull level driver anyway. And there's also going to be question marks over what next for the likes of Herbert Marko, Adrian Newey, and Herbert Marko. Now let's just get one thing straight here. Wherever Max Verstappen goes, Herbert Marko will probably join him. So if Max Verstappen ever decides to join Mercedes, Herbert Marko and his dad Jos will be there with him at Mercedes. If Max Verstappen ever decides to join Ferrari, Aston Martin, or even McLaren, you can be guaranteed that Jos Verstappen and Herbert Marko will also join him at McLaren, Ferrari, or Aston Martin. I mean, as for Carlos Sainz, oh, crikey, what an absolute... I feel so bad for him, to be honest. Now, yes, admittedly, his performances have dropped off slightly in the past few races, and of course, Leclerc has got back on top. And hello to you who have just joined in to this emergency stream, as of course, you've probably heard the news by now. Perez has re-signed until 2026. My goodness me, I mean, Telmex and Carlos Slim must be paying Red Bull 50 to 60 million pounds in terms of sponsorship money, which is probably like, what, 80 million euros or dollars, depending on where you come from. Perez is definitely a marketing asset. I'll give him that, despite of course his performances being very inconsistent and shaky over the past 18 months. But as for Carlos Sainz, well, his only real chance of getting a top seat for next year now lies solely with Mercedes AMG F1. And of course, we all know that we've got the likes of Esteban Ocon, who has of course been released by Alpine. And of course, he has a close relationship with Toto Wolff as one of his agents. And in addition, of course, there's also a possibility of Antonio Kimi Antonelli, who is currently driving for Prema in Formula 2, joining Mercedes for 25, especially, of course, if he can sort out his performances in the junior category. Carlos Sainz, obviously he's going to turn 30 years old come the end of September, and I do feel a bit sorry for him, but it has to be said, whilst he's had his bright moments where, of course, he outscored Leclerc in 2021, and of course, last season in 23, he lacks that one lap pace that Leclerc has, and when the car is fully optimized to its best performance levels, it is very clear that Carlos Sainz lacks that out and out raw pace of a top driver like a Leclerc, like a Max Verstappen, and arguably even the likes of Lando Norris and George Russell. I don't really know it seems to be the best possibilities for Carlos Sainz are literally now lie with Williams, where of course he'll have Alex Albon as a teammate if he joins them, and the Audi Sauber team for next season. So it's a shame, but his options are very much whittling down, and of course, in a sense, I think Carlos Sainz must be kicking himself for delaying his move to potentially Audi Sauber for 2025, because of course they already signed Nico Hulkenberg for next season, and we have to remember they have got two very promising reserve drivers on their testing bench in Zane Maloney, who of course is currently third place in the Formula 2 Championship, and last year's Formula 2 champion Théo Pourchaire. Now, I think I did neglect to mention that Théo Pourchaire is a possibility to join Alpine in next season, but I think that's a bit of a distant possibility. But having said that, I mean, let's face it, Carlos Sainz, I really can only see him going to Williams now. I really can't see him going to any other team because, like, we have to remember in 2018, Carlos Sainz was teammates to Nico Hulkenberg, and Nico Hulkenberg won that teammate battle that season. So, and I have to say this, even against Nico Hulkenberg, Carlos Sainz struggled in terms of raw pace against a driver like him that year. And whilst obviously some will defend Sainz saying, well, he was still only, 23 years old, and of course he was only in the 4th season of his Formula 1 career, I've got to say it was a tad disappointing from Carlos Sainz, to be honest. Yes, I know people will say, well, he did a far better job than Jolyon Palmer, but dude, it's Jolyon Palmer for crying out loud. Like, we all know what level of driver Jolyon Palmer is. Like, we don't need to go through too much detail of how slow he was. I mean, Carlos Sainz, of course, had 2 very decent seasons at the McLaren F1 team, where, of course, he outscored and just about outqualified Lando Norris. But, of course, we have to remember, Norris was still only a rookie, and, of course, Norris was still a driver in development. So, ultimately, like, you have to take Carlos Sainz's performances at McLaren with a pinch of salt, just in the same way you have to take his performances at Toro Rosso with a pinch of salt, because of course he had Max Verstappen for the first year of his time at Toro Rosso, where Max Verstappen was clearly the better driver, and then of course he had Danny Kvyat for the next 2 years, where of course he destroyed Danny Kvyat, but it has to be said, Danny Kvyat's confidence was completely shot, and well, truth be told, whilst Danny Kvyat could be a good driver on this day, he was never really consistent enough to be a particularly good F1 driver, if we're going to be truly honest. And hello there, Mood Child. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for waving by. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you're doing well on this evening or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Of course, you've probably heard the news. Sergio Perez has renewed his contract at Red Bull until 2026. It's really bad news for Carlos Sainz too. I think a lot of us were, I think he made it quite clear that he was holding out for a seat at potentially the Red Bull and Mercedes, but with his options dwindling, and with the fact that, of course, Sauber have already signed Nico Hulkenberg with 2 reserve drivers on their test bench in Theo Porcher and Zane Maloney, ready to replace Zhou Guanyu if required. Carlos Sainz, I have said this, looks like he could well only have Williams as a potential option for next season, which is surely not what Carlos wanted, but that's what F1 politics is like, because of course Red Bull are determined to make sure that they're number 1 driver for the next few years, as long as they possibly can, to hold on to, of course, Max Verstappen. I mean, I don't really need to go through how good Max Verstappen is, to be honest, and, you know, we have to remember was, of course, Max Verstappen has his dad, Jos, and Herbert Marko on his side. Carlos Sainz also has his dad, Carlos Sr., and, of course, his cousin as his manager. So, you know, I mean, Red Bull kind of don't want to be dealing with the politics between the Verstappen and the Sainz camp, and, of course, they already had to experience it quite a fair bit when he had Vettel and Webber as teammates back in the early 2010s, and then subsequently afterwards when he paired Verstappen up with, of course, Daniel Ricciardo, where Daniel Ricciardo was extremely vocal of the fact that he didn't like the way they felt like the team were gradually favouring Max Verstappen more and more, as it became obvious what a talent Max Verstappen was and still is. Sorry, I have to go again, don't worry, but yeah, what was I saying? As for Sergio Perez, well, I mean, he's got a lot of money in his pocket. He's a great marketing asset. A great marketing asset in Mexico. hence why he's got an outright 2-year contract extension instead of a 1+1, because I honestly think the amount of money that Sergio Perez is bringing to Red Bull must be worth at least £50 million in British money, or which is the equivalent of about 80 million US dollars, or at least 70 million euros, depending on where you come from. Like, I mean, you got to realise, of course, in the cost cap era, and the fact, of course, Red Bull are having to spend a fair bit of money on keeping their junior RB team in the sport, Sergio Perez pays the bills. And whilst, yeah, his performances of recently, such as, of course, qualifying 18th at the last Monaco Grand Prix, are not exactly desirable, Perez does have a habit of being pretty decent when the car is gone. But, of course, and whilst it is my opinion that Valtteri Bottas was and still is a better driver than what Sergio Perez is, because let's be honest, Bottas at the very least could qualify in the top 5 on a consistent basis when he drove a Mercedes. Perez does have the added bonus of being a pay driver compared to someone like Valtteri Bottas. I mean, and I think it's pretty safe to say that Sergio Perez has got a very good relationship with the Red Bull upper management. That's all I'm going to say, because how else is he going to get, was it 6 years in total at Red Bull? Like, his stint at Red Bull as their number 2 driver is now going to officially last longer than what Kimi had in his second stint at Ferrari, and of course what Bottas had at Mercedes, which blows my mind because, of course, compared to those two, I mean, Perez is definitely the worst out of the 3. And look, I don't know. I mean, I think I've pretty much explained how on Perez has managed to get such a big extension when arguably he's not really the one to continue. And I have to say, as a Gasly and an Albon fan, this does really tick me off, because when you consider Gasly was only given 6 months and Albon only had 18 months to prove himself, and both of them got flung out the door. But I think their lack of experience meant that, understandably, they needed an experienced number 2 driver to help Max out, which, of course, Perez has done successfully in his first 2 years when he's been there. But for the past 18 months, I think it's become a bit increasingly obvious that Perez is no longer required. But, of course, in terms of Red Bull Junior drivers, Tsunoda just doesn't look like he has a future ever heading towards the senior team. And I have predicted he will probably end up at Aston Martin eventually. Daniel Ricciardo, enough said. Like, dude, that guy is done. That guy is so off the pace compared to Tsunoda. Like, half a second slower consistently in qualifying. Always 4 or 5 places behind Tsunoda. I mean, do I need to explain why on earth someone like Tsunoda is not going to be at, or Ricciardo is not going to be at Red Bull in the future? I don't really think I need to go too far, especially Ricciardo. Like, he's now 35 years old. To be honest, he's been very lucky to be given a second chance by Christian Horner, but yeah. Then, as for Perez, well, he has about, how many race wins has he got? I think he's won 5 races in the 3.5 years he's been at Red Bull, which is okay, but not amazing to say the least, which is, I mean, compared to Bottas, I mean, Bottas won, 10 races in 5 years, so it is a tad disappointing, if I'm going to be truly honest with Perez. But then we have to remember Max Verstappen, especially last year, has been ridiculously dominant in terms of his pace and form. And in terms of pure pace, I mean, Max Verstappen had that race at Miami last year where he started 9th and then quickly clawed his way up to 2nd and overtook Perez with about 5 laps to go. I mean, despite the fact that Perez was leading the whole race, to be honest, right up to that point. And yes, indeed, the door is closing for Carlos. I have mentioned that I don't really see him going anywhere else other than Williams for next year, to be honest, at this point, because Sauber have got Hulkenberg, Red Bull have got Max and Perez again. Mercedes have got Russell and potentially Kimi Antonelli coming, and possibly Esteban Ocon if Total Wolff wants to deliver on his promises that he's made to Esteban in the past. Alpine have got Gasly, and I presume Jack Dolan is going to probably join Gasly next season. Haas are probably going to end up with a driver lineup of something like Magnussen and Ollie Behrman. Although, of course, potentially they could well end up with like Esteban Ocon joining the team. And let's face it, can you really imagine Carlos Sainz joining Haas? I mean, what sort of career move would that be? Like, that would be pretty sad, to say the least, if he ended up at the Haas racing team. Do you know what? I think I need to start a poll, because I think, how on earth have I not started a poll, because I'm just losing followers. Let me put the options down. Williams, Mercedes. I mean, I know there's been conversations and rumours that Carlos Sainz could be joining Alpine, but I just don't know how. I mean, obviously, Sainz did drive for Renault back in 2017 to 2018, but I mean, with a place Alpine are in, like, does Carlos really fancy a move that far down the grade, knowing that they are performing at their maximum capacity and this is the best they can do, which is just 2 points in the first 7 races? Yes, I mean, the news gave me Bottas and Hamilton vibes. I don't believe Perez can beat Max when both are having a clean weekend, but he's helped him multiple times when Max didn't help him back. Yeah, but I honestly think this is a money-driven move by Red Bull, because, of course, the sponsorship money and the publicity and the marketing value that Perez holds in Latin America is massive. I think it is worth roughly something like £50 million or $75 million US, depending on where you come from. And of course, which is roughly, I don't know, 70 million euros for those living in Europe watching this. I mean, I think, Max Verstappen is going to stay at Red Bull since, of course, I mean, despite Adrian Newey leaving, I think Red Bull have made a contingency plan to cover off the fact that Adrian Newey will be no longer there after this season. But I think, of course, there are some engineers who have been tutored by Adrian Newey and sort of his understanding of ground effects and the downforce generated by the Venturi tunnels underneath the floor of the car, and how to continue developing such high-performing Red Bulls for the future. I guess Williams are going to secure with Newey and convince Carlos to join. Yes, that's where I think Carlos Sainz is going to end up, Williams, because I don't see what other team Carlos can join at this point, since, of course, Mercedes have got their eye on Kimi Antonelli for the future and potentially Esteban Ocon. Audi Sauber are probably going to build their team around Nico Hulkenberg and either one of Zane Maloney or Theo Porcher. Alpine have got Gasly and potentially Jack Dolan coming on the way. Haas are just a non-entitled team who no one cares about, and they'll probably be stuck with someone like Magnussen and Ocon for next season, and they'll be partnered with someone like Ollie Behrman. So, and with Logan Sargeant being the obvious weak link on the grid, like, that is the only seat I think Carlos Sainz can realistically go to and be like, yeah, can we do a deal here, folks? Before Perez joined Red Bull and Monster Energy was the most drank energy drink in Mexico. That's interesting. Of course, Monster, of course, I think, were the sponsors of Mercedes for the past few years now, haven't they? And of course, they did that testing exhibition between Valentino Rossi on his Yamaha and, of course, Lewis Hamilton with his championship-winning Mercedes a few years back. Now, it's another interesting one. I have mentioned this a couple of times already in this stream, that Perez is a marketing force for Red Bull. Like, Red Bull, despite Perez's inconsistent performances, does generate quite a lot of profit and revenue for the Red Bull Drinks Company in Latin America. Monster with, oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, Monster is with McLaren now. Yeah, but I know that's more of a recent change, but you got to realise though, I think until McLaren really start to win races consistently, Monster, I think in most people's heads, is going to be associated with Mercedes in the next year or so, unless McLaren can transform themselves into a championship winning team and a regular race winning team. That's who I think mentally most people I think still associate Monster with Mercedes for the time being. I mean, obviously, yes. I mean, I know there was a meme a few years back about how Carlos Sainz was secretly following Fernando Alonso's career path, of course, starting out at Toro Rosso, back, of course, when Alonso started, they were called Minardi. Then Sainz joined Renault. Then he joined McLaren. And then, of course, he joined Ferrari. Now, and funnily enough, that's more or less the same career path that Fernando Alonso was following right up until about 2014-ish. Now, unfortunately for Carlos Sainz, there is no pathway back to McLaren since, of course, they've got Norris and Piastri, and I presume Piastri and Norris are going to be at the team until about 2028 at a very minimum, because I think McLaren are a family team who like to stay loyal to the same group of drivers. Like, I mean, Hakkinen and Coulthard were teammate partnerships for at least 6 years when they were there. And then, of course, apart from, I mean, they had Kimi Räikkönen at the team for at least 5 years. And then Hamilton stayed at the team for at least 6 years. Bottas drove for McLaren for 7 years. And with a couple of exceptions like Fernando Alonso, who, of course, walked out of the team after falling out with Hamilton and Ron Dennis in 2007. And, of course, Keiki Kovalainen's brief spell in the team. McLaren don't tend to change drivers very often unless, of course, they are seriously underperforming, or in the case of Alonso, clashing with the team in the background. So, I mean, realistically, of course, the other thing that Carlos Sainz can do if he joins Williams is that because Williams are not exactly known for sticking with drivers for any long periods of time, he can easily just sign a 1+1 year contract with the Williams team and potentially move to Sauber or whatever seat might become available in the future, like at Mercedes or Red Bull. He could say he raced with all three teams. Yeah, we have to remember that Carlos Sainz's 3 race victories in Formula 1 have all come with the same team. The boys from Maranello. Like, I know it seems a bit weird when you sit there and think who's been the best driver of McLaren since 2019, and some would probably say Carlos Sainz, but unlike Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris, he never won a race for McLaren. And in addition, I mean, Oscar Piastri himself won the sprint race at Qatar last season, so it's a bit of a weird one with Carlos Sainz. I can see Alex Albon back at Red Bull in the future because of the Thai side. The Thai owners want him back. Thailand going to be holding a Grand Prix in Formula 1 in the next few years. I mean, that's a bit of a shock because, I mean, we've got 24 races on the calendar, and I think the only way Thailand could hold a Grand Prix if they were able to outbid another promoter from another country, like, I don't know, they were able to outbid Singapore or China, or because you've got to realise there are certain countries that are a shoo-in in terms of whether they get to host a Grand Prix or not. Like Japan and Australia, in my eyes, are like countries are penciled, nailed on shoe-ins for a spot on the F1 calendar, and the likes of Brazil, America, Canada are also shoe-ins due to their location in the world. I don't think Mexico will be disappearing anytime soon due to, of course, Sergio Perez's presence on the F1 calendar. And then, of course, I mean, the only way I think Thailand could get a place on the calendar is, of course, they were able to outbid maybe someone like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or maybe one of the triple American hosts. Like, of course, I mean, they've got Kota in Texas, Miami, and now Las Vegas. I think the only way Thailand, I think, can get on a Grand Prix slot if one of Las Vegas or Miami decides to disappear from the calendar, along with, of course, maybe Qatar and Saudi Arabia, or even Baku. I mean, look, I mean, I think it really does depend on what Alex Albon wants to do, because I think he's better off at Williams. Like, I know one of his biggest fans, Helen Ballinger, or whatever her name is, came onto my channel and said, I want Alex to stay at Williams, and she's absolutely correct. Like, I think this is the best team for Alex Albon it is for like the next 2 or 3 years of his career, because, of course, I'm not entirely sure whether he dealt with the politics at Red Bull particularly well, and of course having such a brilliant teammate like Max Verstappen alongside him, I think it completely messed his head up, dealing with that sort of pressure and dealing with the need to be so consistent every week and being able to counteract handling issues. Because, of course, you know, when you're at a team like Williams, you could get away with being pretty subpar for like half of the races in the F1 calendar. But when you're at a team like Red Bull, Mercedes, or Ferrari, like, everything you do will be placed under the microscope because you are in the top seat. I mean, I kind of obviously think, you know, something that we're going to have to need to see Alex Albon improve his consistency over the course of a season. I could see Albon in a Red Bull if we stay out of Italy. What's that mean? What? The San Marino Grand Prix gets cancelled? Are you... Oh, not the San Marino Grand Prix, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix gets cancelled. I mean, I know Albon struggled, had that horrible race at Imola a few years back for Red Bull, where, of course, he spun out with a few laps to go, and I could remember doing a race review for that race, and I was like, you know what, I'm not even going to give Alex Albon a score because his confidence is completely shot now, and it really did give me the feeling of I'm kicking a little child that's been bullied to death. It almost felt like kicking a dead horse at that point. Domenico had a meeting with the Thai Prime Minister twice in Bangkok. Oh, right. So the Thai Grand Prix could replace this Belgium Grand Prix. That is an interesting one. I would not be surprised because, of course, I mean, we've got the Dutch Grand Prix at the Zandvoort track. I mean, Holland is obviously a country that's next door to Belgium. So, you know, like, I mean, at this point, like, for the past decade or so, I mean, until the Netherlands came on a calendar, I mean, the Belgium Grand Prix was practically the de facto Dutch Grand Prix, since, of course, all the Max Verstappen Orange Army fans just flooded the circuit. Because, let's be honest, I mean, so many places in Europe now, like, you see the races held there, and it's just a Max Verstappen fan flooding the track. It's just full of orange shirts, orange hats, orange logos everywhere. Oh my God, that Alex Albon's Italian Grand Prix performance was truly abysmal. Like, I really didn't want to pick on him that year, but my word, Alex truly melted under the pressure at Red Bull, and I'm just going to say that, like, it was definitely way too soon for him at that stage in his career. Like, Alex Albon should have never been put at Red Bull at the time he did, but of course... why am I watching an advert with, what's his name, Travis Richter from All American Rejects appearing on it? Is that Travis Richter? I mean, isn't he like 40 years old now? Well, it just basically looks like someone from him anyway, sorry. But, yeah, poor old Alex Albon, I think. I mean, let's be truly honest. I mean, this is why Perez's contract extension really pissed me off, because you go back to like 2011 and 2012, like Perez was struggling to beat Kamui Kobayashi in his first 2 years of F1. But for some bizarre reason, he then got moved to McLaren, where just like Gasly and Albon, Perez struggled at his one and only season at McLaren alongside a driver like Jenson Button. I mean, in terms of qualifying, like, I would definitely rate Pierre Gasly's qualifying speed as being slightly better than Sergio Perez's one-lap pace, despite the fact that Pierre Gasly himself has had further struggles in qualifying, of course, in his last year at AlphaTauri, and of course in his 18 months at Alpine in comparison to someone like Esteban Ocon, who, mind you, has been superb over one lap, but of course, I think I said it before, but Esteban Ocon is just basically Romain Grosjean 2.0 at this point. Like, that guy is a total moppet when it comes to his racecraft. Oh my god. Oh my lord, when it was it, Valtteri Bottas spun 5 times at Turkey. I just came out with that one-liner off spun more times than Miley Cyrus on a wreck. Oh, I just had to, sorry. Like, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that silver arrow spinning 5 times on that slippery Istanbul track. I was like, what does that remind me of? Oh yeah, Miley Cyrus spinning around in the wrecking ball. I couldn't think of anything else. Like, it just gave me flashbacks of that hilarious music video she did for that song she did all the way back in 2013, and I thought, Valtteri, mate, you would have truly have outdone yourself today, my friend. I mean, and I'm looking at the poll, and 50% of my 6 votes have gone to Mercedes. Gotta say that's a bit optimistic there, but I'm still going with Williams in terms of where Carlos Sainz will be moving to, because I mean, if Carlos Sainz goes to somewhere like Sauber, like, he's going to be stuck in a long term. I mean, they said to him that he has to sign a contract until about 2028. If he goes to Mercedes, I think he'll be forced to sign the same sort of contract there as well. And then, of course, we have Haas, which is a career graveyard. Unless, of course, you're Nico Hulkenberg, who is, of course, we all know is a total freak when it comes to qualifying, and of course his ability to pull off extraordinary performances when you least expect it. Unless, of course, the possibility of a podium is there, in which case, of course, you'll promptly see Nico Hulkenberg either develop a mechanical issue or spin off the road. So, if anyone wants to ask me any questions now, you are very free to do so, because, of course, I think in a few minutes' time, I am going to switch to my Encore football channel, where I'm going to do a live stream of the second half of the England versus France women's football game, where, of course, the England women's team are actually leading 2-0. I think I will stay on air for about another 5 minutes. If no one asks anything else, I think I'm just going to turn it off. Thank you very much if you come on, but of course, 5 more minutes it is of me streaming, Sergio Perez, new deal until 2026 at Red Bull, which is pretty safe to say. Red Bull do not want any drama between Max Verstappen and any of his teammates. They want, like, they obviously getting paid a huge amount of money from Mexico to keep Perez on board due to the sponsorship money and the fact he is a huge marketing force in that part of the world, in Latin America and Mexico. You know what, I'm just going to end it there because I can't be all sorry. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.